depending on where you are tuning in from. This is The Awesome Journey, and I'm your host, Kelly Steinicke, along with my co-host in care, Christy Howard. And we're just two girls that connected on LinkedIn 15 years ago, live on opposite sides of the country, have giving hearts, a passion for paying it forward, and I may have prayed to be living louder in my purpose. And now here we sit in front of microphones, bringing you The Awesome Journey. And as many of you know, and for those of you that are new here, one of our primary goals is to highlight incredible individuals to share their unique stories and challenges because, hey, we all need a reminder that we are united in our personal journeys. And again, I know I say it every week, but it's true every week. We crushed it. We're so stoked to have Scott Huesing back with us. He was scheduled a couple months ago, for those of you that remember that. And so we're super pumped to have him back with us today. Scott is a retired United States Marine Corps infantry major. He served 10 deployments, did 60 operations in over 60 countries. And he is the best-selling author of the book Echo in Ramadi, which is a recount of his experience as the commander of Echo Company in Ramadi, which is also known as the deadliest city in Iraq. And to boot, if that wasn't enough, he is also a huge supporter of our veterans. And in July, as an example, did a ride across the country, a 20-day ride across the country for Save the Brave to raise money for our veterans and also meet with veterans along the way. To say thank you for your service does not even begin to feel strong enough, Scott. We're super excited to have you with us today. Thank you so much for taking the time. It's a privilege and an honor. And before we turn it over to you, I will turn it over to my co-host here, Christy Howard.
And the technical screw up in the back. So we apologize because I think I started where I was laughing. Yeah, you know, I start and then I forget to start live. So anyway, the one thing I can say about LinkedIn is you never know who you get to meet in person, just like Kelly in person over 15 years ago. And I were able to meet in person. God, it was like maybe 6 years ago, 5, 6 or something like that. And you know, when you get to know somebody, you get to know them. Now they're stuck with me. But anyway, I'm so excited to have Scott here because his heart for giving for our veterans, for their families is just, it's how Kelly and I stand. So anyway, Scott, you get to tell the story about the shit show that you went through during Iraq. And then to start there, well, yeah, you can go back. You can start wherever.
Sure.
But we want to hear about the book, hear about when let's go forward.
Well, thanks for having me on. I know we had some coordination issues, but as a longtime friend of yours, Christy, too, and just meeting Kelly, it's been it's always an honor to get on and share part of my story and reconnect with you. And we did that, and we figured this out through 𝑻𝒉𝒆, who's also a best-selling author, works at Grand Canyon University in Arizona, and he is not a veteran, but has written so many great stories about two fallen heroes, Ryan Job and sadly now Mike Day, whose book Perfectly Wounded. We were all good friends, but that's how we met several years ago. And you know, like all stories, they all seem to start different. Mine is like many, I think, for young people in America. I barely graduated high school with a stellar 1.24 GPA. I would challenge any viewers of this show listening in to try and beat that, but it's not a true confession. So
I think I can, Scott. I can beat it. I can beat that. I can beat that. College after 2.5 years. 0.1.
Well, I share that part of my story because after I enlisted in the Marines, I went to college and did much better. And I share that with people because it's really a testament to what military service does to give the type of leadership and guidance to young men and women who, like me, it wasn't as if I grew up in a really harsh life, but I didn't have a lot of adult supervision. And it wasn't that I was a bad student. I just didn't go a lot. And, you know, I did much better in college. And that really thrust me into, my story as a company commander in Ramadi, which was the deadliest city in Iraq in 2006 and 2007, as we fought at the height of the insurgency. And most people will remember that's when George Bush ordered an additional 20,000 troops to really flood the battle space in Al-Anbar province, because what was happening almost 20 years ago now, it's hard to believe, was this giant game of whack-a-mole where bad actors and insurgent fighters would fight and stand their ground in one of the cities in Baghdad or Fallujah or in Ramadi, and then they'd get crushed and go to find powder, and they'd go to ground, and then they'd pop back up. So in 06 and 07, that surge strategy really allowed us to apply a lot of pressure in multiple areas. And it just so happened that Ramadi was where they decided to fight us the hardest. And it was a battle that really lasted 2 years, from 2004 to 2006, with units like 2nd Battalion, 4th Marines going in and out and back again, along with our Army brothers and everyone else in the joint service component who was fighting the fight. And for me and the young men that I had under my command, over 250 Marines, soldiers, and sailors, it really redefined what urban fighting was since the Vietnam War, where we were fighting in a city of over 300,000 people, day in and day out, 5, 6, 7 times a day, in direct contact with a very well-trained insurgent force. And it wasn't a matter of if we were going to get in a firefight that day, it was when and how long it would last, up to 5 hours in some cases. And really for me, the young men that I had under my command, they really took care of each other and me better than anything I've ever experienced in my life. To this day, I wouldn't be sitting here if it wasn't for that type of leadership at every single level of those guys I had on my team, really surviving in that type of environment. And I think that their leadership and the fact that they cared so much and loved each other so much, that was the one thing that allowed us to lose as few Marines as we did. And I attribute that to them. So I'm pretty grateful. And it's a remarkable story that I wanted to share, not just of the fighting, because it's not a book about war. It's a book about people, and the young men and women, 18, 19 years old in most cases, and the families, and my Iraqi interpreters and our Gold Star families. It's a story about people, and this, Christy and Kelly, this power of human connection that we all share. And I think that when people read that, they understand that the book is really about that, and it's about leadership and team building and overcoming adversity. And I wrote it so we wouldn't lose that one piece of history, a very significant piece of that war. But I also just wrote it for those young men and women and the families. And fortunately, I was blessed that the book has been a #1 bestseller, and it continues to sell. And I love it that people read that story, because reading those stories of greatness, of these young men and women who raise their hand to serve, I think is vital in the landscape we're living on right now in America, with our U.S. military suffering a really serious recruiting crisis. And I'm not throwing that word crisis around lightly, but it's important.
Amen to that. And I started the book and I haven't finished it. And I know, again, I say this all the time too, but our guests write great books. So we'll put all the links in the comments and in the post promo. But it is so incredibly well done. I've already cried. I am a crier, but it's very deep emotion. And like you said, it's about the relationship. And of course, most of us can never even begin to try to understand what that connection and that respect, that need for one another is really like. And that is incredible that you were over there as long as you were, with such minimal loss and such a heinous, I don't even know the right word to describe it, environment of what you were living in. Because I can't imagine going on, in the sense of, like you said, when it's not a matter of if we have another battle today, it's just when. And having them 4 or 5 times, like the motivation to continue to keep going on has to just be gut-wrenching, I would imagine. I mean, how do you find the strength in one another to continue, because the exhaustion has to be incredible.
We rely a lot on the training, and I'll tell you, I didn't have some hand-picked special forces unit. We were all infantry Marines who had trained for a long time together, as Marines do, and it really became a daily battle of survival, because one of the problems with fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan is that we never really defined what winning was, and that was a failure, not for me, not for the young men and women who fought at the tactical level. That was a failure at our administrative level, not just one presidency, not two, but three
Mhm.
administrations during this 20-year. That was a challenge, to really, being a don't know actually what you're fighting to win. But at the tactical level, if there were bad guys to kill, we did it. That was our job, and I don't say that, lightly. But again, it was a very dynamic environment. It was as if the streets were literally spilling over. The fighting, like liquid into the burners of a stove. It was that bad,
Mm.
and the type of commitment that those young men have to one another to take care of each other day in and day out. It's physically exhausting. And at that time, people always ask me if it was hot in Iraq. It was the coldest I've ever been in the winter in Iraq in November, through the spring, because it's the desert, and we had probably been malnourished for a long time. We're fighting every single night. We're working off limited sleep. We had a lot of fatigue, but it was so cold. And I think people always think of the Middle East as this sweltering desert, but that compounded the friction that we dealt with every single day, and that friction that I talk about of how to make effective leadership choices on the battlefield so that you're making sure you can bring as many Marines home alive as possible. And you know, people will ask, how do you do that? What was your metric of success? What was winning?
Mm.
Well, if it was killing bad guys, yeah, we were lighting up the scoreboard. But as a commander, my only metric of success was bringing as many Marines home alive as possible. And that's tough when you got to, pull the leash sometimes on over 200 18, 19, 20-year-olds who for some reason think there's some sort of romance or glamour about being shot at. I never personally liked that. When I remember that happening and thinking, it's like, hey, why are these guys shooting at me? I'm a pretty nice guy. But for the young Marines, they never disappointed me, and the level of bravery and commitment and courage that they showed every single day, that's astounding to me. When I wrote about it, especially when I look back at all of the characters I wrote about in 𝒏𝒏 and Ramadi, how young they were. And I thought, geez, man, these guys were playing high school football not 10 months ago. And now they're thrust into this chasm of war, and with guys that they haven't known that long. But that's how quick the bond is, especially for Marines, because we pride ourselves on that, because it is a large part of our culture, our ethos, and everything we stand for.
And a lot of them couldn't even drink alcohol because they weren't of age.
Right.
I mean, that, to me, I've mentioned this many times on this show, is the most messed up thing I've ever heard. I get the drinking age, but you're sending them off to war. They can't drink. I mean,
right.
Well, they couldn't drink legally. I know, Marines being Marines.
But yeah, well, I mean,
yeah,
I understand that.
There's a difference.
So as a commander, because you're going into an area that, one, you don't really have the blueprint of where the bad guys are. So where, and again, everybody always thinks this is only in the movies. It's not. It's real stuff. But where do you sit down and go, okay, we've got to go here. However, you're going blind everywhere. I mean, how do you figure that out?
Well, obviously the guys shooting at you, they're bad. They need to die. But there's others that
Yes.
work as an insurgency,
Yeah.
using the people of Ramadi and Iraq against us as well through threats and intimidation. It was something really hard to see, because when you are at that level fighting in an urban area, it's very personal. These are, and you know, I never called them collateral damage, Christy. They weren't. They were men and women who were proud Iraqi citizens that wanted to have their kids grow up and drive a car for the first time and go to soccer games. And that's who we were fighting amongst. But this insurgent force, it was very hard to tell who the enemy was. They were a nameless, faceless enemy. And one of my fellow Marines, who's was my radio operator, actually lives here in Texas with me. He yells one day and he says, "Sir, you got to come up here." And we go to the rooftop and he hands me the binoculars and he says, "Hey, look across the neighborhood over there and you can see these guys running in between buildings. They're wearing running shoes. They're all wearing sneakers. Everyone else is wearing sandals." And I thought to myself, yeah, if you're going to pick a fight with U.S. Marines, you don't be wearing flip-flops. That's a bad day. So that was the type of, you know, intuition and, you know, keen observation that these young men had. And I listened to them, and they were right in most cases, because I think the real secret of any of my success is, one, always surrounding myself with smart people. And the second thing is listening. And trust me, it's not lost on me that I'm a guy that travels around a lot, and I do a lot of public speaking to different organizations, but really listening to people at every single level and understanding, you know, what that human connection is for them, I think was really a great component to how successful we were as a unit on the battlefield.
Dang. And I mean, there's so many questions I could go into the weeds of all of that, but my next kind of question or thought process in this is, how was the transition for when you finally decided to retire and then become a civilian?
Well, for me, it was pretty easy. I'd always had a plan, and I prepared for that. And sadly, a lot of guys like me and women that spend 20 plus years, multiple deployments, taking care of so many people other than themselves, because that's the oath they take, they fail to plan for themselves. So the transition piece for every individual soldier, Marine, or sailor is quite different depending on the number of years they have in service and what they've planned out. I was pretty lucky, and I didn't put a lot of stock in the actual organizational transition plan that the military offers those, because honestly, it sucks. I'll badmouth it every single day, because we enlist the best and brightest people to join our military. They serve for 4 years or 24 years, and the package we give them on the exit is not commensurate to what they've had. Because let's face it, the military puts a lot greater demand physically, emotionally, sometimes spiritually, on those who serve than any other guy that works at State Farm Insurance. It's just not the same. It's very high intensity. And when they transition, I was lucky because I already had a plan, I already had a job, but there's plenty of guys that just don't do that. And that's compounded with, sometimes they feel that loss of connection, they feel loss of unity, they feel loss of purpose. But I think that that's important to talk about too, because before the show we were talking about, you know, mental health and you know, ways to eliminate anxiety in your life, and how to do that. Well, when you transition from the military, it's frightening for a lot of people. I always tell people, just be excited and have a plan. I think that's probably the most important thing, because I'll tell this to everybody, anyone who's listens, the military and first responders, we don't own the definitions to the words like service and sacrifice or anxiety or depression. Like, everybody in life deals with that type of stuff. Everybody deals with loss in their life, but it's very cliche to say this. It's how you move forward from that and continue to be successful. And I think that that is something I really have been talking about a lot over the past couple of years, and banging that drum as loud as I can, is we have to stop focusing on all the darkness and sadness within the veteran community, the way the military is being used by administrators and highlight all of the great things that our veteran tribe is doing, because those success stories are getting overwashed by a lot of the negative stuff. And as a guy that has been working for the last 8 years since I retired to help prevent veteran suicide, not just raise awareness. I could care less if people are aware, hey, those guys are killing themselves. No, we have to find cool ways to prevent it and also empower people so that others can see this is what you get out of military service. And we can talk more about that, because I think it's very important, again, on the social and political landscape right now with what's happening to our military.
Oh, amen. And we had this.
So we do have
Oh, go ahead.
Are you able to hear me? I'm having issues on this side. We've got a question from Jeff. He wants to know, how did your subordinates handle stress on the battlefield, and also how did you help facilitate mental health in the battlefield?
Good question.
Well, we weren't. I don't think, honestly, we're thinking about that hour to hour, day to day. I think what we do as commanders and as leaders at every level is to prepare them before they get to the fight. So we stock their toolkits with every possible thing that they need to fix the solution. Inculcating them and really, I guess, vaccinating them to the stresses of combat, the realities of loss, the shock and trauma of seeing the worst conditions created by humanity that are possible on the battlefield. There is no training for that, but the mental preparation that we do, I think, sustains them. But it's a really great question, because as I was talking about earlier, when I wrote my story and I looked back at how young these men were, there was a real light that came on. And it wasn't some catharsis as I'm hammering away 300 pages of a book and barfing my life, to be hung on Amazon. It was that they were so much younger than me. I was a 35-year-old captain with a lot of life experience, multiple combat tours under my belt. And I thought to myself, how are these guys going to process all of this trauma, not having that type of life experience that I did to balance that out? And so after, hundreds of interviews that I did with those who I'd written about in Echo and Ramadi, and all the tens of thousands of veterans I deal with now in my life, that question is still really unanswered. And there's a lot of guys that are still on active duty now that are compartmentalizing that trauma as we speak. So how you unpack that, how you take that messy jar of trauma like jam and you seal it up and you put it on a shelf, how you deal with that if it happens to, shake the ground one day and a jar falls and it smashes the ground, there's this huge mess. I think we're really lucky as veterans because of how we trained and prepared our guys, but also the vast support network that we have for veteran support organizations, which number over 45,000 registered with the IRS alone, to really help our veterans and really help veterans of every generation through that process. So that's a really great question. Thank you for asking.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. We can always count on you for a good question. And I think that's such an important thing, or as you were saying that in the beginning, it just made me think, we don't have time to think about mental health when you're on the battlefield. Like, you just have to be in reaction or proactive mode all the time. It would be after the fact where it's all like, how do you, like you said, how do you process all of this and put it together and to manage? And one of the things I also noticed is I was reading through a lot of this before the show was, interestingly enough, I think that the government, and I think George W., to be precise, like referred to Ramadi as the path, the new pathway to freedom, or something like that. And the press referred to it as the surge, and then of course boots on the ground referred to it as hell. And it just and I'm sure it's because of the way of the world, that it just rang a different way. Certainly to me, because I was like, man, that's so screwed up of how things are packaged, so not realistic. and then having those real
But
conversations.
we know that.
Oh yeah,
But
well,
we
we
know
do.
that. I mean, you need to always talk to the person that boots on the ground, because that's where you're going to get the truth.
Well,
but most people don't.
Ramadi at the time too was the capital of 𝑍𝒏𝒆 province, and still is, and it's a key city. And however they packaged it, and we heard those terms going around too, heart of darkness and the devil's lair and all these things. But at the end of the day, when you're fighting and surviving, and you have the responsibility of hundreds of lives, it is important. And really, it's maybe a follow-up answer to Jeff's question is, I had learned this from a lot of great leaders along my career. And before I sent those men to do what they had to do, I sat them down before we crossed the line of departure, and I ordered them to kill. And I did that for a very specific reason. When I looked out into that sea of sturdy faces of young men who had just all shaved their heads in some ritualistic nature before they went into battle, I ordered them to kill. Because, it's not a human thing to do. Humans don't do that. It's not a natural thing to kill another human being. But I never wanted those young men to hesitate at that one singular moment when they put the stock of that rifle on their shoulder and they looked through the sights and they had to make that one life-changing decision to squeeze that trigger and take another human life. I never wanted them to hesitate, for themselves, for me, and for all the Marines that they fought alongside, because it is a life-changing decision. But I wanted them to know that I was ordering them to kill, because Marines are great at a lot of things. Don't get me wrong. They're fast. They're sharp talkers. They shoot their rifles straighter than anyone else on the planet, and they just attack and kill with this unbridled ferocity. But every time they did that, and they were great at it, they're also great at taking orders. And I ordered them to do that, because when they left that miserable place, I wanted them to leave it with a happy heart and understand that it was me telling them to do it. And that's what that's what they understood. And I think that resonated with a lot of the guys.
Wow. That's incredible.
Well, they also had respect for you, the respect that they had for you. So when you came home, how did you, tell us what the direction you went to helping other veterans and where you're going to? And
well, I think that everybody has capacity. I talk about this a lot, and everybody can make an impact. I use those two words a lot: capacity and impact on what you do. And I already told people listening to the show, and you guys, like, you don't have to have been kicking doors in Ramadi or jumping out of planes or flying planes to serve. Everybody has that capacity to serve. And I'm in a very unique position where I understand that not everybody has that capacity. Not everybody has to share their story and hang it on Amazon or Barnes and Noble to really make an impact on people. And sometimes as leaders or as artists or professionals, you don't seek that impact out. Like, oh, I was a great leader today, someone's going to thank me for my leadership in 5 years or 20 years. Sometimes you'll go your whole life and never really understand that you've made such a huge impact in someone else's life. And it doesn't have to be thousands of Marines. It could be one person. And that type of service, I think everybody has that capacity in them to do that. Because whether you're working in the veteran nonprofit space or in any charity whatsoever, I think that word is often the question is like, well, what is the impact we're making in people's lives? And everybody always wants to do more. They always want to help more people. They always want to raise more money. And I always remind people that I'm surrounded by is that, hey, man, you're doing more than most. And I think that's an important message to remember too, when it comes to giving back. And, for me, Christy, there's no expiration date on my commission as an officer of Marines. And I feel that I'm very fortunate to have that capacity to continue to lead and continue to serve and possibly be a voice and an advocate for those that maybe just don't feel comfortable in that space. It's not an indictment on their depth of service or commitment to the country or their patriotism. It's just not what they're great at. And I think that that's important.
Yeah. And now that we're talking
So tell us about,
I have a little bit of a lag. Sorry.
The motorcycle. I think it's my end. Technical issues in Florida. What can we say?
Right. Go ahead.
Tell us a little bit about the ride you did this summer, and now directions that you're looking at.
That's exactly what I was going to say. So we're on the same page.
Yeah, we started the ride across the country, and like, you know, I like talking about all the greatness of our veterans, and I went to high school with a great guy who was a Navy veteran, Dave White. But sadly, and we went to high school together, and I lost Dave to suicide, and his mom, who probably fed me more meals in high school than my own family, she told me she wanted me to come to South Carolina and give the eulogy for Dave. And Dave was this big, gregarious guy, kind of like Tommy Boy, Chris Farley, and just a lovable dude that suffered and struggled on his own. And it was the height of COVID, no flights. So I said, man, I'm going to hop on my Harley and I'm going to ride across the country and back that first year. And I tell you what, it was July. It was triple-digit heat as we rode across the country, but it really was just a mode of transportation. But as we started promoting the event and everyone found out what I was doing and who was doing it with me, it turned into this Forrest Gump-like event where we had dozens and sometimes hundreds of riders, especially here in the great state of Texas, come to these events every single day. They'd ride me in and out of town. Hundreds of riders. We're doing a ton of media and really sharing what we're doing and the power of that connection where riders were coming out. And I'll share two stories. One was the first year we did it, where me and my good friend Pete Turner were at a gas station, and I'm doing my required social media posting, and these two young kids come around the gas pumps, and they work for a plumbing company. And he says, hey, I was eavesdropping on your conversation, but I just wanted to say thanks for your service. My dad was a veteran. I didn't serve. And he reached in his pocket. I almost cried telling the story. He hands me $20 and he says, I want to pay for your next tank of gas. And thank you guys for what you're doing.
Wow.
And seriously brings me to tears thinking of what that does, because during the ride that year, it was really at the height of COVID, exposing the best of the human condition to me across all levels of, you know, age, rank, gender, demographics, political affiliation, religion. It was just a really cool thing because it was so boots on the ground and we were just grinding. It was physical. And then just this last year, we had probably 50 riders in Arizona, and one of the guys rolls up to me and he hands me this little box, and he's a retired Marine Master Gunnery Sergeant. And I open it, and it's a aluminum wristband with Dave's name on it, honoring Dave, why we started the ride. This is 4 years later now, and a pin. And I thought to myself, man, the thought and effort it took just to get the name spelled right and go to the engravers and present this gift at a gas station as we're pit stopping with dozens of strangers. It was super special to me. And he then confided in me that if it wasn't for events like this, not me or what our organization was doing, he wouldn't have the drive to keep doing, because he's tried to kill himself 3 times. And that was a mind blower right there. And it just really validated what we were doing. And I think that, again, you don't have to ride 5,000 miles across the country on your Harley. If you're a bakery shop owner, do some brownies for veterans and give the proceeds and have a bake sale. I mean, just be great at what you're great at is the message I always try and share.
Oh, I love that. And it is so true, you know, and I think it was such an important part of that story is the fact of this guy, that knowing that he's not alone and that people are out there doing something keeps him going. And just doing something positive back into the world, how it has such an amazing impact to truly save lives. Because I think when we had Crystal on from Wheelchairs for Warriors, you know, what's the number on vet suicides daily is like 44 or something incredible. And that's not counting first responders. which is just, it's gut wrenching. And, you know, some, like you just said, some of the most simple things that we can do in our own community to help out. Buy a cup of coffee for someone. I mean, I do that when I go to Black Rifle. I do try to always, you know, find someone and do so. Incredible stuff that you're doing to continue to help vets and pay it forward. What do you have going on now going forward? Because you're doing some new stuff now, correct?
I am. I'm working with a revolutionary HR company called 𝑻𝒉𝒆. We are really trying to, again, help solve this military recruiting crisis to introduce this cutting edge technology to the Marine Corps recruiting establishment and all of the recruiting commands service wide to bridge that gap, not only the geographical gap, but also have a platform that really speaks to, you know, Gen Z and Gen Y, in a way that they're being communicated to, in a way that they can consume information the way they're familiar with on their phones through short videos. And I think that we've made so many great inroads with this company. We're going to be part of that solution, because I'm never content just sitting around the VFW or whatever, American Legion. I'm not saying that disparagingly, complaining about the problem like some old graybeard. I'm always trying to identify the problem, frame it, and then find a solution. And I was very fortunate to meet two amazing Americans that wanted to take this technology and put it in front of the military, and we're continuing to drive that home. So I'm working on that. I'm working on growing a new foundation to really help cross multi-generational learning for leaders, both veterans and artists that want to do things like I do. And we're tying that to my new company that I started with a young soldier that actually worked in my command in Ramadi that I didn't know at the time when I met him. He reminded me of it, but we started a company called solidcopymedia.com, and it's a coaching and mentor service for veterans, first responders, and government officials only, where we take guys like me and women who are all best-selling authors or industry professionals, former presidents of publishing companies, and we take them through the process of what you have to do to become a writer and the different types of ways you can write. Because, again, I really want to highlight the great stories of success, and yeah, everything's tipped with a little sadness in life. I mean, that's life. Yeah. But creating an opportunity for veterans and first responders where they can kind of bypass a lot of the BS that is sold to them from uncredible sources. Now you've got a guy like me who is a trusted agent surrounding himself with other veterans who are all best-selling authors that have done it. And so we're providing that service to them. And, you know, it's a small investment that they can make in themselves to really cut through a lot of the layers. So I've always got 9 irons in the fire. I like doing that. I like staying busy. And I think too, like you guys, you never really know the one listener or the person who's in that you help. But they're out there. And I think if you do that at the beginning and the end of every day is, you know, wake up and understand that there's so many people that you can make an impact on, and just try and help someone else. It's one of the 4 things I try and do every day. And I share this with large and small groups I talk to, from corporate to collegiate, to private organizations or nonprofits, is, you know, do 4 things every day. Do something physical where you're physically moving, whether you're cutting wood or on the treadmill. Do something to educate yourself. Read every single day, or make sure it's critical learning and not just scrolling through social media. And then the 3rd thing I do is I always try and put myself in an uncomfortable position. Maybe it's a strange podcast I've never been on, and I feel a little bit nervous, and I force myself to dive into the awesome journey. But no, it's not. But it could be for someone. It could be very uncomfortable, or talking to a group of high school students. And then the last thing I do every single day is I try to help someone else besides myself. And, you know, even if I did an hour of that each day, you know, man, there's still 20 hours left to do whatever else I want. And I think that subscribing to some sort of discipline is important for your mental health, for your personal success, for your financial success. You have to be doing that and be disciplined. And understand, when you fall from the discipline, if you don't do something physical one day, don't beat yourself up over it. There's always the next day, and you just drive yourself a little harder. And that has been really instrumental in keeping myself mentally in tune and doing that mental health and physical checkup for me every single day to really push myself and continue to be a lifelong learner.
I love that.
That's cool. I just don't do the workout. I do everything else.
Yes, and having grace. I think that was an important add-on there, is give yourself grace when you're not doing maybe something you thought you should. But I mean, those are 4 factors that everybody should live on, regardless of who you are, what you are, where you are. Incredible. Your overall just being, Scott, is infectious. You are such a blessing to so many people, and how you continue to pay forward and just highlight the positive stories and doing so much for so many. And, saying 9 irons in the fire, I was going to interject and be like, so what else are you going to do? Like, you have a couple of free hours during the day, I'm sure. And so everybody understands he is sitting in a parking lot because they are in a storm in Texas right at the moment, because they are doing some prep work for an event that they're going to be having in November, which we can't thank you enough for doing, which is pretty great.
That's I'll remind everybody, if they're interested and they're in the greater Dallas-Fort Worth area, on Saturday, November 4th, in Frisco, Texas, at Rough Rider Stadium, will be our annual Celebrity Softball Classic, where from 1 to 7 p.m. there'll be a veterans game with a bunch of great veterans on the roster, and then at 3 p.m. the celebrity game kicks off, and I will be there. I'll be playing. Other great people are there. A lot of NFL, Major League, celebrities, Hall of Famers. My good friend Matt West from the Professional Bull Rider Association is going to be there. My very dear friend and neighbor, Tracy Curry, more widely known as the DOC, who was one of the co-founders of Death Row Records, iconic rapper. Tracy's going to be there, and it's just a great family event all day long. You can get tickets at the door, or you can go to the Celebrity Softball Classic online and you can get a ticket, but there are only 400 left.
Okay, well, Scott, if you can email me that stuff, I'll blast it out, because I've got all the Dallas connections.
Me too.
So if you just shoot me over that email, I can put it on LinkedIn, Facebook, all over the place.
Yeah, my pleasure. For sure. So
unfortunately, I can't fly in. Yeah.
I know.
So besides doing that, how else can we help you? What else can we, I have a mouth, so what else can I shout out about you?
Well, I think that just sharing our network. Yeah, just sharing our network. I think I don't like the soccer mom contacts, and I think that's one of the cool things that people trust me with their information. When I say, hey, you got to talk to Christy or Kelly, is like they know that I'm a trusted agent for them. And just before the show, I already threw 2 names at you. I'm like, you got to get these people on. So I think keep in touch and keep cultivating those relationships, because some need more water than others. I'm more of a cactus. If you get me, every couple months, I'm good to go. So
fabulous.
That's what I love. Kelly and I saw each other seven times in 15 years. Yeah. You don't have to be, talking to them all the time. You just know that the relationship's there, and just, text them. Are you okay?
Yeah.
Haven't gotten a response yet in like 5 days.
Yeah. Yes. Knock, knock.
Well, I totally appreciate you coming on.
Yes.
Well, thanks again, guys, for having me. I appreciate it.
So Kelly, I think we can close down since he's got his meeting.
Yeah, I think I got a little bit of a lag from it, which is kind of weird on at least on my end that I'm seeing. So yeah, again, we'll share all the information that we just talked about from Scott. Do send us, the November 4th event I did myself. I lived in Addison for a period of time and have family in Frisco. So I'm happy to send that out to them as well, but we'll share with the audience. So if you guys know anyone that's going to be in the Frisco area, November 4th, please do share. Check out all the other links. We'll share the links to his book, Echo and Ramadi. He does have other books. We will also include those as well. Connect with him, follow him. Scott, just an honor, privilege, blessing to have you. You're an amazing human being, and I'm grateful and blessed to have been able to have this time with you today. We appreciate you so much. And again, thank you for your service. And to everyone, we will see you next Tuesday at 1:11 p.m. And you'll just have to wait to see who our guest is next week. Until then, we are all on this journey together, and together we make it awesome. Have a great day, everyone.